Ok, bonjour à tous. Une très rapide introduction en français. Donc en fait, on a une présentation aujourd'hui. Pardon? Non, il faut mettre les casques. Mais vous avez des casques pour écouter. Ils mettent pas le niveau très très fort. Donc si le mieux, c'est d'écouter avec le casque. Donc une présentation de Pablo, le CEO de Penpot. Et de Kailidos, qui crée le logiciel Penpot et qui vient de Madrid. Donc la présentation est en anglais. Voilà, et donc je passe la main à Pablo. Thank you, Pablo, for coming.
Thank you very much. So I'll speak loudly, so you don't... Is it okay like this? Okay. So it is true that my presentation will be in English. But first, I would like to share some words in French, since I'm in Paris. So, avant de commencer ma présentation aujourd'hui, je voudrais remercier l'organisation et aussi Pierre Bodraco, qui a décidé de m'inviter pour être ici aujourd'hui pendant un dîner à Madrid, il y a, je crois, peut-être 5 mois déjà, en sachant, lui, que ce soir, je dois être à Barcelone. Mais bon, c'est un honneur. Je voudrais aussi vous confier, maintenant que personne nous écoute, que mon discours d'aujourd'hui représente pour moi une conférence historique où être la risée de notre profession. Mais bon, comme mon beau-père disait, en utilisant une expression très très française, c'est la vie. C'est la vie, donc le spectacle va commencer. Les microphones marchent, mais il fait que vous utilisez l'audio, d'accord?
Il ne marche pas en fait.
Ah non, il ne marche pas, d'accord. Il ne marche pas?
Il y en a certains qui ne marchent pas. Oui, mais ils ne s'allument pas. Il ne s'allume que s'il y a un casque dedans.
Ça marche ou ça ne marche pas? La.
It's okay.
It's okay? Okay. Well, now switching back to English.
Pour que ça marche, il faut brancher le casque.
So I'm going to discuss our business model, but first I want to tell you what Penpot is. So Penpot is an open source, web-based, real-time collaboration, design and prototyping platform. We compete directly against tools like Sketch, Figma, or Adobe XD. Adobe XD is now discontinued, but the other two still go. And we ensure that we target both designers and developers. And for the first time, we have an open source design tool that is a first for collaboration that welcomes developers into the design process. We are not going to discuss that today. We're going to discuss our open source business model, okay? But if you're interested in the product itself, please go check out penpot.app. So there is always this quest for an open source business model, but is there an open source business model? What there is various business models, and we will define what a business model is, that might be under friendlier terms with open source. The same way we have business models that are fine with proprietary software. But there is no such thing as an open source business model. And yet we try to pursue business models that thrive if you are building open source software. I'm sure all the talks today are going to discuss that. But I want to pause here and define for you one of the many definitions, but still a valid one. What is a business model? And a business model is nothing else than a way to capture value through the value that you are creating for your users. So you can define a business model in the sense that you say, I will capture value, sometimes that will be money, sometimes not, through the process of value creation. So I create value for someone, and then I ask for something in return. That is how I capture value. The business model should be defined in those terms. And of course, there is always a tension between value creation and value capture. How much value you are creating for the user so that you are allowed to capture value. How much? There's always this tension. And you can see that tension, you think of as a ratio, okay? You are capturing value divided off by the value you're creating. And this is tough. This is tough. But I'll give you an example. In a restaurant, you go to a restaurant and you ask for a meal, and you are, there is some value that they created for you. You are in a place, you have the service, you have the atmosphere, you have the meal in front of you. You have all that, and you have a sense of the value that the restaurant is creating for you during that experience. And then you get the bill. That is where the value capture moment comes. And then you instinctively, we all do this every time, we do this ratio. And if it's fair, we're happy. But if it's unfair, we are not that happy. We don't perhaps able to express this in words, but you are feeling that tension. And it's funny, because if you receive much more value than you are being captured, then you also feel at odds with that. There's a psychological thing then, and then you think, perhaps if this is so cheap, perhaps the value that they created for me was not that big. It's amazing how the brain works here, okay? So it's always like this. Now, software has a bigger tension because it's much more difficult to define how you create value. It's something digital. It's fluid. It's not just an experience in a restaurant. So proprietary software has solved this by making it relatively cheap in psychological terms. And typically, what you have here, traditionally, is that proprietary software goes for a 10% ratio here. So if you think you are generating value equal to 1,000 euros, they will ask 10% of that. Does it make sense? Are you following me all? Okay. And the good thing about this is that you can be relatively cheap because digital operates at scale. So even if you're cheap per unit, at scale it works because it's fluid, it's digital. And also, we have the subscription models, which perhaps are not asking for the 10%, perhaps they're asking for 1% every month. So after the first year, you actually surpass the traditional 10%. And then it goes on, it goes on. Again, it's psychological trick here. Again, does it make sense? Okay. And this has how proprietary software operates. Open source software typically gets 0.1% if it gets anything. Because you are building on top of value created from other open source elements, and you are giving a lot for free. And it's only a tiny fraction of those users that are willing to pay for something extra that you can offer. And that tiny fraction is represented also there, that 0.1%. Using open source, you also benefit from digital, operating at scale. And then our little trick here is the bottom-up adoption. What we do basically is we create so much value for all of us globally, that even if we have a tiny fraction of value capture, it's still sustainable, okay? Okay, by the way, this is the first time I'm giving this talk, so I expect some feedback at the end, okay? It won't be the last, but it's the first one. And so what about added value services? Now that you understand when people say added value, you think, okay, added value as a creation or as a capture? Well, both, okay? So that's that. So let's use this, I just made up this thing, capturing value through services and capturing value through a product. So if you go to ++, like you capture value through services and product, you see companies like Salesforce. Everyone knows Salesforce, right? If you don't, you're not so obsessed about the product, but the services are key to you, perhaps you are a UPS, company like that. Baldur's Gate, anyone knows Baldur's Gate 3? Amazing video game. A video game that is not MMO will typically go for the product capture value, but no services, unless you are an MMO, and then it's all about services. And then a free tool like Adobe Acrobat Reader will fall into minus, okay? If you go to open source, we can also get some examples here. You have Red Hat. They do a lot of services and a lot of product capture. You have GitLab, perhaps not so much on the services, more on the product side. Canonical is like kind of the opposite, less on the product, more on the services. And then we have, of course, the minus is a lot, zillions of open source projects. Now, here's the tension that we have at Penpot. we want our most feature-complete offer to be fully open source. And if I go back here, the GitLab model here, typically it's what we call open core, but we will look into that. We don't want a basic version of Penpot to be open source and then add advanced features on top of it, and that is a paid feature. We don't want that. We want the best Penpot experience to be fully open source. And we don't want to capture value from services. So that means that we cannot go services, so that's interdit. And we don't go the open core business model, because that means that we are capturing value through the product, through the open source product. So are we left with the minus where all the zillion open source products are? Still following me here? I'm going fast, but I hope it's OK. So if you look at the bottom right and you get the open core, typically you get the basic experience. It gets advanced, and at some point you get a paywall. It's not clear where. It could be closer to the advanced or closer to the basic. If it's closer to the advanced experience, you get the skinny open core business model. It's very skinny, the paywall. And if you have very obvious, the paywall comes in very soon, then you have a thick open core business model. Could there be a way where you start with the advanced, the most exciting Penpot experience, and you pay to get a lesser experience? Okay, I see some people chuckling. Could there be? We hope for that. Because the way we have seen this is that it's not really about the advanced mode or the basic, but about the freedom that you get with the product or how controlled the environment is. Okay? If you do that switch, then it might make sense for the paywall to restrict the laissez-faire environment that you have. Okay? Still following me, right? I'm going super fast, but you're a very smart audience, so I think we're fine here. And this is why we call tags the controller, because you get the default laissez-faire experience for the advanced user, for the power user, and then if you want to control that, restrict, limit, however the users are using the product, then you have to pay. And so that is tags the controller. Okay? It is not a very commercial name, I know this. We're not going to, this is between us, so I'm fine with tags the controller. We will have to find another name, okay? I know that. But who cares? This is the code name. Show me the code. This is our code. So if we go back to the business definition, business model definition, tags the controller is, well, we capture value from the need to govern how people use the product, not from the user itself, but which remains free as a general rule. This is how we define our business model. It's not for everyone. Not everyone has to pay. Only a few people, or perhaps a lot of people, depending on the need to govern a real-time collaboration design prototyping suite. Okay? Don't forget what Penpot is. So how we make amends with all this is that we build an amazing open source product, and when we separately build the means to limit it. Okay? And it's important to stress separately build the means to limit it as an external configuration layer. So if we go back again to the magical quadrant, we have the proprietary product. You have to pay for that. And it's sitting there closely to open core, in a way. And then we have the open source product, which is --, which is fully open source. And then you exec control from one to the other. So now we have a little game here. I'm going to share 6 capabilities for our product. And you're going to tell us whether they are Penpot or a very silly name, which is Pentax, because it's Penpot taxing the controller, OK? So are you ready for the game? Unlimited teams, unlimited users, and unlimited projects. Hey, very good. I knew I had a smart audience here. Next one, Penpot plugins whitelist. Very good, because someone is deciding what plugins you can install as a user. Advanced options to share Penpot projects and Penpot libraries across teams. Of course. Of course. If you wanted to limit that, though, that would be Pentax. And a lot of organizations want to limit that. But the default experience gives you a Penpot. enforcing design systems and design libraries as the only source of truth. Okay. Imagine that you were wrong. Like everyone's very serious about this. This is just a game. There are no prizes, only stickers. I do have stickers, so you can come after that. Access to design coding spec capabilities for developers. Yeah. There are other tools out there that don't believe in this, okay? But Penpot considers developers to be the power user also in a design tool, so of course it has to be Penpot. And finally, a good old, familiar centralized authentication system, SSO. Exactly. So this is great because this is compatible with some existing models that we are using today, okay? Now, before I go further, how much time do I have? 5 minutes. Yeah. It's okay, Ludovic. You're concentrated here in the... Can I go 10 minutes extra? No, I cannot. So it is very taxing. Sorry, no pun intended. It is very tough to go capability per capability and decide whether it's Penpot or Pentax. So we came out with 3 killer questions. And we go through the questions for every feature or capability. So kind of zooming out a bit. Forget about taxi controller, just zooming out a bit. For every feature that we build for Penpot, we ask ourselves these 2 questions. Will this capability limit the arrival of new users to get to know and use Penpot? If we get a no, it actually could encourage, then fine. Will this capability particularly benefit the advanced user? If we get a no, then we go to the 3rd question. Is this capability relatively trivial to build? Now, I don't have the time to go into why these 3 questions, but the first one is about welcoming environment. The second one is about the power user, being able to do whatever they want. And the third one is having 0 conflict of interest with our community. Okay, but that's for another talk. But if we have 3 no's, and please just chuckle a bit with me now, we have NO times 3, which is, of course, the iron nitrate chemical formula. This is fun and all, but we call features that get 3 no's nitrates. And nitrates are used for fertilizing, and there's the principle that plants use to grow. So this grows the business and grows the community. So it's perfect for us. Again, it's a code name, okay? But whenever we find a nitrate, we find the possibility to have something that is premium for this particular use case. So if you zoom out taxi controller, you get open nitrate model. And you can see here that taxi controller is a subset of this open nitrate model. And of course, this is not a false dichotomy. We don't have open nitrate model or open core. That was great. If you compare it to open core model, there is some overlap. Tiny with taxi controller, very tiny, but still something like SSO. That would be probably the overlap. And then a bit of the open nitrate. So it's not like they're separate, okay? And finally, can an open nitrate model be applied to all commercial open source? Unlikely. But can it be applied to a tool like Penpot? Definitely yes. Thank you very much.
Question? Yes. Okay. 1 second. Hello. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. 2 quick questions. Are you the first doing this kind of business model, and does it work?
Yes. So the question was, are we the first ones to test this, and is it work? So yes to the first question. Some of us has been, we've been in open source for 25 years plus already. And this is the first time this has been defined in these terms. We are releasing this next year, but we have tested this with both community power users and enterprises. And so far we have a high confidence that this is going to work. This is why I was saying that there is a possibility that I will be l'hérisé de notre profession. Because if it fails, you will remember this talk as a massive failure from this Pablo on stage. But we are confident that this is going to work because it's compatible with existing mental models, and it's fine with open source.
We have one more question here.
Thank you very much. Do you have examples of companies or products that use these methods?
No, we are the first ones. This is why I'm presenting this.
Question?
This is a premiere. This is a premiere. You have to. This is a historical moment for all of us, including myself.
So what I understand is that it's not available yet.
No.
So at the moment, it's a classical.
No, we don't have. We only have the open source product right now.
But on your website, there is subscription.
Yeah, but that's for the SaaS. But that's the service.
Okay.
That's different. That's different. That is just a workaround for the SaaS service, but that's only for the SaaS.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
so thank you very much, Pablo. It was really great to have you. If you want to ask more questions to Pablo, don't hesitate. He'll be outside, and he's still there for a few hours before he flies to Barcelona. And so